Welcome to the world of darkness. Fairy tales in which you thought you knew turn from light to dark. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next dark tale.
Snow fell. Each flake, a tiny crystal of ice, descended from the heavens, blanketing the world below in a shroud of white. The forest, once teeming with life, now lay silent under the weight of winter's grip. A cold, unforgiving snow blanketing the land in white. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the chill of desolation. The landscape, devoid of colour, seemed to stretch endlessly, a frozen wasteland. Inside the castle, a fire roared, but it could not warm the heart of the queen. The flames danced and flickered, casting eerie shadows on the stone walls, but their warmth was lost on her. The castle, grand and imposing, felt more like a prison than a home. She stood before her mirror, its silver surface polished to an unnatural sheen. The mirror, an artifact of dark magic, held secrets and truths that no ordinary glass could reveal. It was both her confidant and her tormentor. "Mirror, mirror on the wall," she whispered, her voice a venomous hiss. "Who is the fairest of them all?" Her eyes, cold and calculating, searched the mirror's surface for the answer she both dreaded and desired. The mirror, a creature of dark magic, replied in its cold, flat tone, "My queen, you are beautiful, it is true." Its voice, devoid of emotion, echoed in the silent room, a reminder of the power it held over her. "My queen, you are beautiful, it is true, but Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you." The words cut through her like a knife, each syllable a reminder of her fading beauty and the threat posed by the young girl. "But Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you." The queen's reflection twisted in rage, her once beautiful face contorted into a mask of fury. The mirror's cruel truth was more than she could bear. The queen slammed her fist against the mirror's frame. The impact sent a shiver through the glass, but it did not break. Her anger, however, was far from sated. Rage contorted her face, a mask of fury more terrifying than any beast lurking in the woods. Her eyes burned with a fire that the castle's hearth could never match, a fire fueled by jealousy and hatred. Snow White. The very name tasted like poison on her tongue. Each syllable was a bitter reminder of the girl who threatened her reign, her beauty, her very existence. Her beauty was an affront, a constant reminder of the queen's own fading youth. Snow White's innocence and purity were a stark contrast to the queen's dark and twisted soul. The queen stormed away from the mirror, her heart a knot of hatred and envy. Each step echoed through the empty halls, a testament to her growing resolve. She would not be outdone, not by a mere child, not by Snow White. Her mind raced, plotting and scheming, determined to find a way to rid herself of the girl once and for all. The queen's mind, already steeped in darkness, began to twist, to formulate a plan that would ensure her place as the fairest in the land, no matter the cost, a plan as cold and unforgiving as the winter's snow. She gazed out at the snowy landscape, her expression as icy as the world outside. The storm within her was just beginning. Each day the queen's envy grew, a monstrous weed choking out all reason and light. Her heart, once perhaps capable of love, had turned black as ebony, consumed by a jealousy that knew no bounds. The castle, once a place of grandeur and joy, now echoed with her silent, simmering rage. Snow White, oblivious to the danger, blossomed. Her beauty and innocence were like a beacon of light in the dark, oppressive atmosphere of the castle. She moved through the halls with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly. Her laughter a melody that brought a fleeting sense of warmth to the cold stone walls. Her laughter echoed through the castle halls, a stark contrast to the queen's silent, simmering rage. It was a sound that reminded everyone of what the castle had once been, a place of joy and celebration. But to the queen, it was a constant, grating reminder of her own fading beauty and the love she could never reclaim. The queen could not bear it. She summoned her huntsman, a man known for his loyalty and his skill in the dark arts of the forest. Her voice, cold and sharp as ice, cut through the air as she issued her dark command. A tall, imposing figure, he stood silently before her, his face etched with the harsh realities of the forest he called home. His eyes, hardened by years of survival and the hunt, met hers with a mixture of fear and resignation. He was a man who knew death intimately. The forest had taught him many things, but nothing could have prepared him for the darkness that now stood before him in the form of his queen. "Take Snow White into the woods," the queen commanded, her voice cold and sharp as ice. Her words were like daggers, piercing the huntsman's soul. He knew what she was asking of him, and the weight of it pressed heavily on his shoulders. "And make sure she never returns." The forest, with its dark, twisted paths and lurking dangers, would be the perfect place to carry out such a grim task. The queen's eyes bore into him, leaving no room for doubt or hesitation. "Bring me back her heart as proof of your deed." The queen's demand was as chilling as the coldest winter night. The huntsman felt a shiver run down his spine as he imagined the gruesome task ahead. The huntsman looked at the queen, his face unreadable. He had faced many dangers in his life, but this was different. This was a command that went against the very essence of his being. He was a servant of the crown, bound by duty. His loyalty to the queen was unquestionable, but this command tested the limits of his obedience. He bowed his head, accepting the task with a heavy heart. But even he, hardened by years of hunting and hardship, was taken aback by the sheer malice in her eyes. It was a look that spoke of a darkness deeper than any he had ever encountered in the forest. He knew the darkness that lurked in the hearts of men, but this was something else entirely. The queen's command was not just an order, it was a manifestation of her twisted soul, a soul that had turned black as ebony. The forest welcomed them with a hushed silence, the air heavy with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. The towering trees stood like ancient sentinels, their branches whispering secrets to those who dared to listen. The ground was soft and damp, muffling their footsteps as they ventured deeper into the heart of the woods. Snow White, young and trusting, skipped ahead, her basket swinging by her side. She was blissfully unaware of the shadows that seemed to stretch and reach for her, the forest's eerie silence a stark contrast to her innocent laughter. Her heart was light, filled with the simple joys of nature, the rustling leaves and the chirping birds. She had no idea of the danger she was in, the darkness that stalked her footsteps. The forest, with its twisted paths and hidden dangers, was no place for a child. Yet she moved with a carefree grace, oblivious to the malevolent eyes watching her every move. The shadows seemed to pulse with a life of their own, a silent predator waiting for the right moment to strike. The huntsman watched her go, his hand trembling on the hilt of his hunting knife. His heart was a battlefield of conflicting emotions. Duty and compassion waged a silent war within him. He had been given a command, a dark and terrible command, but as he watched the innocent girl, he felt his resolve waver. The weight of his task pressed heavily on his shoulders, each step she took deepening his inner turmoil. He could not do it. He could not spill the blood of an innocent. The thought of her lifeless body lying in the forest, her bright eyes dimmed forever, was more than he could bear. He knew the consequences of defying the queen, but his conscience screamed louder than his fear. The knife felt like a lead weight in his hand, a symbol of a choice he could not make. He would defy the queen, even if it meant his own death. His decision was made. He would protect Snow White no matter the cost. The forest seemed to hold its breath as if acknowledging the gravity of his choice. He felt a strange sense of peace wash over him, a clarity that had been absent moments before. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but he was ready to face it. He knelt before Snow White, his heart heavy with guilt and fear. The words he needed to say caught in his throat, but he forced them out, each one a painful admission of his own helplessness. He looked into her eyes, seeing the trust and innocence there, and felt a pang of sorrow. He was about to shatter her world, to introduce her to a darkness she had never known. He told her of the Queen's plan, his voice a low murmur in the stillness of the woods. The words felt heavy, laden with the weight of betrayal and fear. He spoke of the Queen's jealousy, her insatiable desire for beauty and power, and the terrible fate that awaited Snow White if she stayed. His voice trembled, but he continued, knowing that she needed to understand the gravity of the situation. Tears welled in her eyes, but she did not scream. The realization of her peril was a heavy burden for one so young, but she bore it with a quiet strength. Her tears were not of fear, but of sorrow for the life she was about to leave behind. The forest, once a place of wonder and joy, now seemed dark and foreboding. Yet she did not let her fear show, her resolve mirroring that of the huntsman. She did not fight, she simply nodded, understanding dawning in her gaze. The innocence in her eyes was replaced by a steely determination. She knew what she had to do. The huntsman's words had painted a grim picture, but they had also ignited a spark of courage within her. She was no longer just a child, she was a survivor, ready to face whatever lay ahead. "Run, child," the huntsman urged, pushing her gently in the opposite direction. His voice was urgent, filled with the desperate need to see her safe. He knew that every moment they lingered was a moment closer to danger. He watched her hesitate for a brief second, her eyes searching his for reassurance. With a final firm push, he sent her on her way, praying that she would find safety. Run and never look back. His words echoed in her mind as she sprinted through the forest, her heart pounding in her chest. The trees blurred past her, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. She ran with all the strength she could muster, driven by the huntsman's urgent plea and the knowledge of the danger that pursued her. The forest seemed endless, a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. He watched her disappear into the trees, then turned, a plan forming in his mind. He knew he had to act quickly. The Queen's wrath was not something to be taken lightly, and he needed to find a way to deceive her. His mind raced, considering and discarding ideas in rapid succession. The forest, with its myriad secrets, might just hold the key to their salvation. He would bring the Queen the heart of a boar, hoping to appease her bloodlust, at least for a little while. It was a risky plan, but it was the only one he had. The boar's heart, still warm and dripping with blood, would serve as a grim token of his supposed loyalty. He hoped it would be enough to buy them some time, to give Snow White a chance to escape the Queen's clutches. He knew he was playing a dangerous game, but he could not abandon the princess to such a grim fate. The stakes were high, and the consequences of failure were dire, but his resolve was unshakable. He would face whatever came his way, armed with nothing but his wits and his determination. The forest, with its dark and twisted paths, was now a battleground, and he was ready to fight. The forest was vast and unforgiving, but it offered a sliver of hope, a chance for Snow White to disappear, to find safety. The dense foliage and winding paths could hide her from the Queen's prying eyes. It was a slim hope, but it was all they had. The forest, with its ancient trees and hidden glades, was now a sanctuary, a place where she could start anew. For now, it was all he could offer. The huntsman stood alone in the forest, his thoughts a whirlwind of fear and hope. He had made his choice, and there was no turning back. The path ahead was uncertain, but he was ready to face it. The forest, with its secrets and shadows, was now a place of refuge, a place where hope still flickered, however faintly. And for Snow White, it was a chance at a new beginning. Deeper and deeper Snow White ran, the forest closing in around her like a cage. Thorns tore at her clothes, branches whipped at her face. The sun began to set, casting long, eerie shadows that danced and writhed around her. The familiar forest had transformed into a menacing labyrinth. Fear gnawed at her, cold and sharp. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent her heart racing. The forest, once a place of wonder and joy, was now a realm of unknown terrors. She didn't know how long she'd been running, how far she had come. Exhaustion weighed her down, threatening to pull her under. Just when her legs could carry her no further, she stumbled out of the undergrowth and into a small clearing. In the center stood a curious sight, a tiny cottage, its walls crafted from rough-hewn logs, its roof thatched with moss and leaves. Smoke curled from its chimney, a beacon of warmth and hope in the growing darkness.
Thank you for listening. Don't miss the next tale to be told. Subscribe now. Sleep well.